I have the pleasure of welcoming to the morning shot this morning Wisden Cricketers Almanack editor Lawrence Booth, all the way from London. Lawrence, good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is, I've lost track.
But I'm happy to have you during the pandemic. I hope that you've been safe.
I have, thanks. Yeah, it's weird times, but staying indoors and keeping safe so far, so all good.
Certainly. Earlier this month, you launched the 157th edition of the Wisden Cricketers Almanack. You've been there since 2012. For 8 years, you've been the editor of the Wisden Cricketers Almanack. What is it like being the editor of such an historic book with 156 years of history weighing on your shoulders?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's there's a lot of responsibility, really. You want to make sure that you leave the book, when you eventually leave the job, in as good a state as when you found it, or hopefully a bit better. You're conscious that Wisden is read round the world. There's a brand that is built up, as you say, over 157 years, and that people pay attention to what Wisden says. So you take it seriously. You don't take yourself too seriously, because that would put people off. There's room for humour and wit and lightheartedness in Wisden, but it's an important voice. It's got integrity and authority and all those things that you want from a brand. So yeah, lots of responsibility, but also good fun.
Can you talk to us about the contents in between the front and back cover? Because in between the front and back cover, there are about 1,500 pages average in a Wisden edition.
That's right. There's all sorts, really. There's probably 250 pages of comment at the front of the book, where we have essays and essays on the 5 cricketers of the year, on things that have happened in the previous year. Maybe there's been an interesting anniversary, or there's been a think piece related to what's happened in the previous year. We have match reports from all cricket around the world, all internationals, all county cricket. We do domestic cricket around the world. We have a big records section at the back, which Wisden's quite famous for, its statistics. And we have lots of light-hearted moments. We have a thing called the Index of Unusual Occurrences, where we pick out strange things that have happened in the previous year. So hopefully it caters for all tastes. We usually get letters from people complaining that this is missing or that should have been covered differently, but I'd be astonished if we pleased everyone all the time. It's just not possible.
Then the book itself will probably be more than 1,500 pages. It probably be double that. You commission, you edit, you plan, you write, you proofread this book, and as I mentioned, the average page count of a Wisden Cricketers Almanack is 1,500 pages. How grueling is this task?
Yeah, well, it is grueling. I mean, grueling makes it sound a bit negative. I mean, I really enjoy it. It is hard work. There are some very antisocial hours, especially towards publication, which is usually towards the end of February. We're doing 7 days a week, 10, 12-hour days for a couple of months leading up to that. But it's also fun. You're in contact with cricket writers all around the world. You're teasing out ideas as the year progresses. You're trying to get that balance of articles right for the front of the book. You make friends, you find out stories, you find out what's going on, and you're on top of a sport, which is my passion. So it's a dream job in many ways. Yes, it's hard work, and yes, I'm exhausted at the end of it. I always want to go and lie in a darkened room, but there's a great sense of achievement when the book finally arrives and you can add it to the shelf with the other ones you've edited.
When you, as a cricket writer, when you write for Wisden Cricketers Almanack, that's one of the pinnacles of your career, because the Wisden Cricketers Almanack, you can't just be any cricket writer. You really have to be the creme de la creme. Talk to me about your selection of cricket writers, because here in the Caribbean we have a number of cricket writers, but not everyone is selected to write for Wisden Cricketers Almanack.
Sure. I mean, it's an interesting question, because increasingly some series around the world are underreported. So you can struggle occasionally to find a writer who was there. I mean, if we're trying to cover, for example, Afghanistan v Ireland in India, which is where they play, it's quite possible that no Irish journalist was there, and no Afghanistan journalist, and the Indian journalist wouldn't be there. So sometimes you're casting your net around a bit, but generally speaking, when you approach someone to write for Wisden, they seem quite happy to say yes and get their name in the book. I think they appreciate that, it means something. It's there forever. It's not like a newspaper that generally gets tossed away the next day. It's something that you can have on your shelves and will be referred to in 20, 30 years' time. So there is, I generally find, a sense of pride about people wanting to work for Wisden, and as long as that continues, so will the book, I think.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody rather who would say no to writing for Wisden Cricketers Almanack. Part of your job is choosing the 5 top players for the year. Do you do this solo or do you have some help with it?
Well, the buck stops with me. It's the editor's choice. I do talk to people, obviously. I want to make sure that I'm not missing someone obvious. That's a sort of recurring nightmare of any Wisden editor, that they've forgotten about an obvious choice. I mean, just to explain how it works, there are 2 criteria for being one of Wisden's 5 cricketers of the year. The emphasis is on the previous English summer, and I know that annoys some people from outside England, but we are essentially an English book. The vast majority of our readers are English, so that's been a tradition that's been going since 1889, and we think it's right to continue that tradition. And the other criterion is that you can't have been chosen before. So when you say the 5 top cricketers, it's not strictly the 5 top cricketers, because last summer, for example, Ben Stokes and Steve Smith, who were probably the 2 standout cricketers from the Ashes, had both been chosen before, so we couldn't choose them as one of the 5. So what we end up with is 5 good stories from cricketers who've prospered in the previous year. Not necessarily the best 5, but they're invited once to join the Wisden Hall of Fame. That's the idea. They're there forever. That's their year. And people generally understand how it works. And I think the players still regard it as a great privilege.
This is the longest running sports publication in the history of sport. How have you seen the Wisden Cricketers Almanack change over its 156-year history? You used to be a reader before you became editor.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, well, going right back to the start, actually, 1864, it was 112 pages. It cost a shilling, and they printed very random lists, like all the canals in Britain and Ireland have longer than 30 miles. They clearly had a few pages to fill right at the end of publication. Thought we'd better throw some stuff in. The following year, it got a bit more crickety, shall we like, and it has never looked back, really. There have been some lean times during both world wars. The Wisdens are thinner then, around 300 to 400 pages. Really, the last, I would say, 20 years, the quality of the writing has gone up another level. Wisden used to be associated with as a book of record. People would turn to it for their statistics. Now the internet, of course, can update numbers by the second. Wisden gets 1 crack at that a year. So we have to be a bit clever about the way we present stats. We still have our statistical records section, because I think people still expect that in Wisden, but we're trying to emphasize the writing as much as the statistics. And Wisden is now, I hope, a book that you can browse through and jump around and cross-reference for yourself and dip in and out of for the whole year. And I hope it's a good read. I think that's perhaps the change it's undergone, in its 157-year history. Yeah,
they call it the Cricket Bible in England, don't they?
Some people do. Funnily enough, we try to avoid that phrase. We let other people call it the Cricket Bible if they like, and we're not going to correct them. But it's a phrase that at Wisden we sort of unofficially banned from using.
It is, however, a truly iconic book, and not just the contents of the Wisden Cricketers Almanack, but also the thickness of it, the look of it. It is truly iconic. Do you think, though, that the digital age poses a challenge to the Wisden Cricketers Almanack?
Undoubtedly. I mean, as I was mentioning earlier, the statistical section in particular comes under threat from the internet. We can't possibly compete with live stats. You know, there's a 6-week lag between going to press and publication. In that time, even in that time, the statistics are out of date. So we have to be smarter about how we do our stats. We have to run tables, so on, that are specific to Wisden. That's one of our challenges. In terms of the editorial side, I think there's room increasingly in what is a fairly sort of instant news world for a voice that stands back a bit. And actually, Wisden doesn't seem to have been harmed by the Twitter age, if you like, where you can get a hot take or an instant view out immediately. People still cherish, I think, a voice that's had a bit of time to consider events and to step back, and has built up over 157 years a kind of reputation for being independent, essentially. You know, there are so many compromised voices now in the media world. Wisden is independent. No one's telling the editor what position to take. I can upset whichever administrators I like within reason, as long as it's sort of constructive criticism. So that won't change. And I think so long as Wisden has that association in the minds of readers, it will continue to be important.
An e-published version, I should rather say, was released back in 2011. The publisher said it's a distillation of what's best and its bigger brother. What do you think the future of Wisden Cricketers Almanack will look like? Will it have to change?
Yeah, it's always changing. We look at it each year, and we wonder what will still work in a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. A lot of long-term planning goes into it. A couple of years ago, for example, we introduced a domestic T20 franchise section because we felt that tournaments like the IPL, the Big Bash, even the CPL were making a big splash in the world in cricket's ecosystem, and it was not right that we should continue to relegate that to tiny parts of the book. We had introduced a women's section a few years ago as well. We now have an annual Women's Cricketer of the Year. So we have to reflect the way cricket's changing. It's no good us simply saying each year that Test cricket is all that matters and T20 is an abomination. You know, that may be our personal views. It's not mine as it happens, but we have to go with the flow, and sometimes we have to preempt it. Some readers say, I don't want to read about the Pakistan Super League in Wisden. Well, that's tough luck, I'm afraid. We're reflecting the way cricket changes. So if Wisden loses touch with the way the sport is, we become irrelevant, and I wouldn't blame people for not buying it. So we have to stay on top of developments.
Well, just to build on that comment, if Wisden had stayed the way cricket was back when it was first published, then it certainly wouldn't be in existence today as well. Back in 1938, the 75th edition of the Wisden Cricketers Almanack saw the color yellow, that distinctive cover, which would carry on up until present day. Can you walk us through how yellow has stuck on the front cover and back cover of the Wisden Cricketers Almanack?
Yeah, it's just become a tradition. People expect that color now. They have their collection of books on the bookshelf, and they don't really want you don't suddenly want sort of 3 rows of yellow or primrose, as some people think of it, and then a pink or a blue or a green. That is what people associate with Wisden now, and it's almost become iconic, hasn't it? It's a bit like the photo on the front, which was first put there in 2003 by Tim Delisle, who was a one-off editor, and at the time, people said it was blasphemous. You know, there'd always been words on the front cover of Wisden, and the little woodcut with the guys in the top hats playing cricket by Eric Ravilius, British artist. Well, that woodcut is still there on the spine, but there's now a photo, and it's become a story in itself. Who will be on the cover of Wisden? We had Joss Butler this year whipping off the bails, the run out of course which gave England the World Cup, with New Zealand's Martin Guptill diving for safety, which he never reached. So that was the moment England won the World Cup. That seemed like the moment of 2019 as far as English cricket was concerned. So things that are traditions, people react against them at first, and then they quickly become part of the furniture.
Yeah, the split second that changed the history of English cricket. When we look at the launch of the Wisden Cricketers Almanack, it usually takes place in April, prior to the start of the English domestic season. There could potentially be no domestic cricket in England this year because of the pandemic. How much more important does the Wisden Cricketers Almanack become this year then?
It takes on a unique importance, really. My thoughts ahead of editing the 2020 Wisden, the one that's just come out, were that it was going to be a biggie. You know, it would tell the story of England winning their first Men's World Cup, a very exciting Ashes series, and of course Ben Stokes' famous innings at Headingley, plus all the other cricket that was going on around the world. So I thought that was pretty daunting. Well, the 2021 Wisden is shaping up as potentially even more daunting, because we may not have very much cricket to put in it. At the moment, we can't say how much cricket there's going to be. English cricket has already said there'll be no games before May the 28th. Well, I think we can all safely say that will extend as the lockdown in this country continues. We may get to a position where we're running out of time in the English summer, which ends at the end of September as far as cricket is concerned. So we're going to have to be inventive, possibly, about what goes in next year. We have to be calm about the fact that it may not be as thick as recent Wisdens. It may not be 1,500 pages, but that doesn't necessarily matter. It may become a collector's item because it will go down as the Wisden that told the story of the coronavirus and its effect on cricket around the world. So you have to take these things in your stride, but it will be a challenge, and in a funny kind of way. I mean, I hope that coronavirus disappears as soon as possible, but I'm looking forward to seeing how we deal with the challenge it's presented.
Certainly. You know, other countries like Australia and India have tried Wisden Almanacks as well, of their own, obviously. What did Wisden Cricketers Almanack, the original, make of that?
Very happy for the word to be spread. is an interesting one. It raises the question of how English is Wisden, and can Wisden be supplanted into another country without the tradition that's built up in this country in England, because we've been going since 1864. The answer is it's not easy. No matter how far globally the Wisden brand extends, there may be something about the book buying public in one country that isn't the same as the book buying public in another. So we're delighted if other countries give it a go, and we wish them all the success in the world. It's always fascinating to see how it goes.
The Wisden Cricketers Almanack is usually very heavy on English cricket, as you mentioned, but why do you think, and how do you think it's become so popular around the cricketing world? Because it's a collector's item for many cricket fans, not just in England, but around the world.
I think it's what we've been talking about, really. It's the trust you build up, and loyalty you build up over 157 editions. That's very hard to replicate, and you so long as you don't, you don't go too far in your pronouncements as each year takes place, you don't lose the trust of readers, then I think they'll keep coming back to Wisden as a sane voice in an increasingly interesting world, shall we say. So, Wisden was published in the war years as well, and I think there was perhaps a loyalty from readers there. Wisden stuck by cricket when the world was threatening to fall apart, and it published even though those war editions are thin. And perhaps people can see that if Wisden can get through a world war, then it can get through a pandemic, and we're just going to keep going. That's the plan.
Wisden prides itself on being the quote-unquote independent voice of cricket. How important, or more important, has that become in the modern game?
Very important, I think. We see stories all the time about TV commentators who might get into trouble with their paymasters because they've been critical of the wrong person or a member of an influential cricket board. Michael Holding had an incident at the World Cup in England last summer when he criticised some of the umpiring, and he got it in the neck from his producer, and Michael wasn't very happy about that. He stressed the importance of editorial independence. Wisden doesn't, as I said earlier, Wisden doesn't have that issue. I don't have anyone, my boss at Bloomsbury, who are our publishers, they're not leaning on me to take certain positions on cricket. They trust our editorial team to get on and do the job. So independence in a world where there are lots of vested interests now, newspaper owners and so on, TV companies, I think is crucial. I think it's important that a voice, a powerful voice, keeps holding administrators to account and making sure that the game is run as smoothly as it can, what someone once called the conscience of cricket. And it's a grand claim, but it's one I try to live up to as editor, that we hold the right people to account, and we come from a position of loving cricket, essentially. That is our driving force, and that's what will keep motivating us.
Lawrence Booth, congratulations on the 157th edition that was launched earlier this month. We wish you many successes for the years ahead.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it.